Welcome to Gut Health Part 3. So, in this module, let's cover the top tips to improve gut health. Remember, the body works as a system, so things that will improve your metabolic rate will improve your gut health over time. Things that downregulate metabolism will negatively impact gut health over time. So, in this module, let's cover the top tips to improve gut health once and for all. So, we include our 15 top tips, and we will go through each of these in this module. Assess body temperature and pulse, assess your regular food choices, find the right fiber that works for you, eat set meals, poop daily, lower stress, assess your eating habits, reduce consumption of PUFAs, consume collagen, raise your vitamin D levels, support your vagus nerve, avoid food additives, buy organic grains, avoid iron supplements and iron fortified food, and limit alcohol consumption. Now, you do not have to do all of these things, and some may resonate with you or work better for you more than others. There's no perfection, but consistent small changes make big impacts over time. But before we dive into those 15 tips, I just want to touch on some tips to provide some symptom relief that are not restrictive and will thus not hinder long-term metabolic health. But these will not necessarily fix gut health in the long term. Where you express symptoms along your digestive tract will vary person to person, as the weakest link is impacted when energy production is downregulated. And as we discussed in the last module, when the metabolism is high and the body is functioning as usual, your body will naturally produce adequate amounts of bile, stomach acid, and digestive enzymes required to properly break down food. Remember that the body temperature plays a major role in the function of enzymes inside of us and the rate of reactions inside of our bodies. Our metabolism is calibrated to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and a drop of only 1.86 degrees results in a loss of approximately 50% of enzymatic activity. The lower the temperature inside of us, the slower the chemical reaction. And as the temperature is increased, the reaction rate will go faster with each increase until it reaches its optimal reaction rate. So in a low metabolic state, of course, digestion enzyme and digestive function will be compromised. And the symptoms can vary person to person, as that low energy state will cause malfunction at the weakest link, which will be different for each person. And fixing energy metabolism should improve all areas of digestion. But while we're healing and fixing energy metabolism, there are a lot of digestive support options that can really help people. However, it's important to remember that these supports don't fix the underlying problem. And don't experiment with all of these at the same time. Be strategic with your introduction to see if something is actually helping you. So if you're experiencing a ton of digestive symptoms right now, make sure to check out the Gut Support Tools document. It's in the resource section. It's a PDF. And this is where we discuss how to know if you have low stomach acid and what you could do to support that. We also discuss digestive enzyme support and tips for general bloating, stomach pain, diarrhea, constipation, acid reflux, and difficulty digesting fats. Now, let's cover the top 15 tips to improve and fix gut health once and for all. First, improve body temperature and pulse. So this is something that we have discussed extensively in the course so far. An easy way to measure metabolic rate and thyroid health is through body temperature and pulse measurements. You will see improved digestion as you increase your metabolic rate, since this means that the digestive system will have more energy to perform various functions. And this also means a rise in body temperature, so you can use the rise in body temperature as a gauge that we're heading in the right direction. Thyroid hormone, which is high with a high metabolism, thyroid hormone activity is a prokinetic, meaning it increases intestinal motility, and there are plenty of studies to document this linked in the PDF module script. Thyroid hormone activity also increases digestive enzyme and bile production, protecting against bacterial overgrowth. So as one progresses in their health journey, using this body temperature measurement can help guide us in the right direction to see if we're actually improving systemic function. If your body temperature is lowering, your current approach will not improve your gut health and resiliency in the long run. So along these same lines, you have to ask yourself, are you eating enough? Because improving metabolic rate involves eating enough calories for your needs. Now, there are certainly people who are overeating for their current needs and should reduce caloric intake. But on the flip side, there are also many people who are chronically eating low calorie. If you are constantly under eating, really anything under 1,800 calories regularly, you cannot expect your digestive system to have enough energy to function properly. A review article from 2022 found that eating low calorie is associated with a greater chance of constipation. The researchers also cite an older study suggesting that eating enough can reduce the chance of constipation as well. If you are struggling with constipation or regularity, a good first step would be to assess your regular calorie intake. This is partly due to just less waste product in general, but also slower movement of food through the digestive tract since lowered metabolic rate. The body is not going to keep metabolic rate high if there's constantly low energy, low amount of calories coming in. That serves as a signal to the body. So the goal will be to slowly increase your calories over time without unnecessarily gaining weight. This can be super helpful for digestion. When someone follows a very restrictive diet and removes entire food groups or macronutrients and is not mindful of total calorie intake, it's really easy to be low calorie, and this is going to lower metabolic rate and hold one back from actually fixing their gut. So if you're in this very restrictive state, can't tolerate a bunch of foods, the first step is to focus on slowly increasing your total calories with the foods that you can tolerate, because you can't improve metabolic rate and gut health when you're chronically under eating. You can slowly start to introduce more foods over time as your systemic energy production improves. All right, the next tip is to assess regular food choices. So now that we've reminded you of the importance of systemic energy production and gut health, our first tip is to assess what we eat regularly, because what we eat day in and day out changes our gut microbiome composition and impacts our energy production, both of which determine gut health and digestive health. It's okay to be restrictive right now when finding a dietary strategy that provides temporary relief. However, it's important to remember that this is a form of symptom suppression and not fixing the underlying issue that led to the problem in the first place. The goal should be to get out of that state slowly over time. Frequently eating foods that are causing you adverse reactions at this point along your journey, no matter how, quote, healthy they are, can cause a vicious cycle of poor digestion and inflammation. As we've discussed, endotoxins are toxic substances bound to the cell walls of gram-negative bacteria that are released when the bacterium dies. High levels of endotoxins in the gut and leaking out of the gut are anti-metabolic, as they can inhibit cytochrome C oxidase, which is the last part of the electron transport chain in energy metabolism, and the PDH enzyme, both of which are essential for properly using carbohydrates and raising metabolism. So you should never force food down even though it's considered healthy or pro-metabolic. You have to meet your body where it's at right now. So remove foods that aggravate your gut currently with the understanding that you will likely be able to add most back in. This may include grains or dairy or raw vegetables or certain types of fruit. Understand and know your unique triggers and remove them temporarily as you work on gut health and metabolic health. But don't label these foods in your mind as a no or off limits. Maybe instead as not right now, but soon. You don't want to cause food fear. So one example would be dairy. So understand your dairy limits right now, as the following items on this list may elicit completely different responses for you since they have different amounts of lactose. And lactose requires the lactase enzyme to digest it properly, and people in a low metabolic state may have down-regulated the production or function of that lactase enzyme, but that can come back. So comparing, for example, how you tolerate cheese, butter, different milk sources, and store-bought cottage cheese and other items. So cheese, most aged cheeses virtually have no lactose, and you can try sourcing A2 for casein proteins that may be easier for you to digest. Butter is likely fine since it contains very little lactose, but next step would be ghee since all of those proteins are filtered out of the butter to make ghee. Then comparing conventional milk versus raw milk. Do you digest one better than the other? Conventional milk can be really low quality due to how the animals are raised, and sometimes conventional milk can have additives and fillers in the milk itself. Some people may be able to tolerate raw milk much better than conventional milk since it contains a variety of living bacteria which can facilitate the production of lactase enzyme in the intestine, which has been shown to help with lactose digestion in lactose intolerant people. Plus, high levels of lactoferrin in raw milk can actually bind to and reduce endotoxin levels and inflammation in the gut, improving gut health. In fact, raw milk consumption is associated with improved gut microbiome composition. Now, store-bought cottage cheese and yogurt that are most likely pasteurized milk, and they can contain some added bacteria strains that can be problematic for you. Others do just fine with them. So just assess whether or not those added bacteria strains added to the cottage cheese and yogurt at the store, if they're doing good for your gut right now or if they're causing some problems. Bacteria strains aren't, quote, bad, but different companies use different strains and different types. And if you can't tolerate any amount of dairy right now, that's okay. We will get there. So to assess what we are eating on a regular daily basis and how this can modulate gut health, there are a few factors for you to consider to see what you do better with. So the 3 factors would be ease of digestion and food preparation. Second, types of fiber and total amount of fiber. And third, starch to sucrose ratio. Where do you do best? We all have a different microbiome balance right now, and we all have different eating and life past events. And what works for you at this point in time may be slightly different than what works for you 6 to 8 months from now as your health improves. Less living in fear and more in empowerment of what is and what isn't working for you at this point in your life. So we should definitely pay attention to food preparation. Digestion is an energetically costly process, and the pre-breakdown of certain foods can ease the digestive burden on our bodies. This is particularly important for someone who already has a compromised digestive system. Let's not make it work on overdrive when it's currently being beaten down. The whole goal of eating food is to extract energy from it, and the more energy we have, the more functions the body can turn back on. So what do we mean by easy to digest foods? Well, here's some examples. When consuming vegetables, make sure these are well cooked. When you're consuming starches like potatoes and rice, make sure, again, to cook these well, as raw starch molecules are very hard for the body to break down. And then for some, stone fruits like apples, pears, and peaches can be tough to digest due to the pectin that they contain. So stewing or cooking these down can actually help ease digestion there. Along the same lines for fruit, out of season, unripe fruit can cause a lot of digestive issues. So really try to prioritize in-season, ripe fruit, or using frozen fruit that's often been picked while it was ripe and in season. And then you can use those in smoothies, make jams or jellies, or just warm them up and heat that up on the stove. And the final note would be like a bunch of raw greens, because that requires a lot of digestive energy to break down. And so you'll likely tolerate well-cooked greens much better. So for example, collard greens that are boiled for a few hours would work a lot better than trying to eat those slightly undercooked or raw. So being mindful of the source and cooking method of various foods that you do well with is really important. Keeping food easy to digest can reduce chances of bacterial fermentation and excess endotoxin formation while we are in this compromised gut state. Another variable that you can experiment with is fiber. So both the total daily intake of fiber and the dominant fiber type. Finding the right fiber that agrees with you is important. So fiber is demonized in some nutrition camps, but fiber is good for us. We do not need to go crazy overboard and go out of our way to add a bunch of fiber as supplements like resistant starch or other fiber supplements, because beneficial enzymes that are contained in food are inactivated by the strong heat methods used in these manufacturing steps to create these industrial fibers. So they can often be prepared from waste and have impurities after that refinement. So we definitely want to get fiber from food. But eating fiber through food shouldn't be demonized and is actually well documented in the literature to support and improve overall health. Without enough fiber, 90 to 95% of bile, which contains toxins, mycotoxins, pesticides, xenobiotics, and excess hormones, can be recirculated in your body through a process called enterohepatic recirculation. And at the end of the day, someone with good gut health and a strong metabolism doesn't really need to worry about fiber. Eating a wide variety of food, eating a lot of food, your fiber needs will likely be covered. But when you're in a gut compromised state, of course, certain fibers and total fiber intake can cause negative symptoms, because if fiber just sits in a slow digestive state, someone that's constipated, it can sit and it can feed bacteria and lead to more overgrowths. So paying attention to what fiber types lead to negative symptoms while you work on your overall metabolic health can be helpful. So the ideal situation would be eating a fiber amount where you could form good poops, and you poop those out daily to get rid of excess hormones, waste, and toxins. Non-ideal situation would be eating a ton of fiber and being constipated, where all of that just sits inside of you and gets recirculated. The state of our own microbiome will determine the effect different fiber types have on you. We have found that this is very individual and requires experimentation. Fiber can feed bad bacteria for those with poor gut health, but that shouldn't be normalized. We shouldn't blame the fiber. Instead, blame the current state of the gut, because fearing fiber is just another food fear we do not need in the current health and wellness space. So while being a little more mindful of fiber can be helpful for those with slow gut motility, the long-term answer isn't to remove fiber. Instead, we need to speed up transit time to ensure that the fiber is moving through us. So for fiber, there are two different types, soluble and insoluble. Neither are bad, but the response to each can vary depending on the current state of gut health. Soluble fiber dissolves in water and creates a gel, and this fermentable fiber is the type that's often recommended by mainstream nutrition through starchy grains, green leafy veggies, cruciferous veggies, pectins, and gums, since it lowers blood cholesterol. And mainstream is still obsessed with cholesterol, despite data showing that slightly elevated cholesterol can be protective. But the power of soluble fiber is that it can bind to bile acids, which are what bind up used hormones and fat-soluble toxins to carry them out of the body through the gut. When these aren't bound to, they get reabsorbed and recycled. So a diet with sufficient soluble fiber and a fast transit time is important in supporting the body's natural detoxification process and hormonal health. Soluble fiber can also serve as a food source for good bacteria in our gut microbiome, acting as a substrate for the production of butyrate in the colon. Remember, butyrate is the primary energy source for those epithelial colonocytes, which are those gut lining cells. And so making sure that they're well fed will improve the function of tight junctions and regulate mucosal layer thickness, which all make for a healthy, non-leaky gut. Insoluble fiber, on the other hand, does not dissolve, and it attracts water into your stool, making it softer and easier to pass. So this type of fiber adds bulk to stool since it moves through the system rather undigested. One example is cellulose, which is a pretty harmless fiber since bacteria generally can't break it down, so it largely passes through as bulky fiber. So all plant substances contain both types of fiber, but some are much higher in one type than the other, and that may determine whether or not that food works well for your digestion at this point in time. So it may be helpful to experiment to find which type of fiber works better for you, as both types can be helpful. So foods with the highest ratios of soluble to insoluble fiber include beans, lentils, Brussels sprouts, avocados, sweet potatoes, figs, chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, apples, pears, oranges, and oats. Now, on this list, a few things we probably do not want to consume regularly would be chia seeds, flax seeds, and pumpkin seeds, as these are higher in PUFAs. And then flax seeds are also very estrogenic. They're 5 times stronger than soy. And remember, estrogen blood work is not representative of the amount of estrogen you have stored in your tissues. And given this modern world where we are exposed to plastics, pesticides, years of birth control, estrogens in our food, etc., we do not need more flax and phytoestrogens in our life. Now, on the flip side, foods with the highest ratios of insoluble to soluble fiber include well-cooked mushrooms, carrots, and bamboo shoots, berries, shredded coconut, pineapple, masa harina, dates, cocoa, guava, persimmons, kiwis, and a few other types of fruit. Again, both types are important and play a role. Our ancestors consumed both types of fiber. However, for someone with a compromised gut, large amounts of soluble fiber can sit in the gut and putrefy, since it is easily fermented by bacteria in the gut, exacerbating the problems of leaky gut and bacterial overgrowth, whereas insoluble fiber is less likely fermented by intestinal bacteria. So temporary relief may include experimenting with various fiber types, not something to freak out about or put labels as good or bad. So how much fiber should you consume? Again, the end goal is to not have to stress out about fiber at all. You shouldn't eat zero fiber, but we don't have to try to be perfect with a specific daily intake. While fixing gut health and navigating through this, learning about the different types and levels in various foods can definitely help you gain some awareness about which types of fiber work better for your gut right now. At what fiber amount and what fiber types do your bowels function well? This will vary person to person. Ultimately, we need to address the motility issue, which depends on metabolism and thyroid health, to ensure that those fibers are moving through you and bring waste with it and gunk that's been sitting there for a long time that can feed bacteria growth. So you could experiment with the following ideas. The first would be ratios of insoluble to soluble fiber, and 2, total fiber intake in general to see if they improve symptoms. You can use food tracking apps like Chronometer to monitor total fiber intake, and then try out different carb sources. One's higher in insoluble and one's higher in soluble, and run experiments. So prioritize foods and fiber and eat enough of these to meet your total calorie needs, and prioritize ones that don't cause noticeable symptoms at this point in time. But as you improve metabolism and body temperature, your body should be able to handle more and more food variety. So speaking of fiber, let's discuss a very particular type of fiber that can help serve as a gut cleaning modality for some people in a low thyroid state. If you really don't tolerate other fibers well, the carrot salad may be a great option for you to ensure we're getting at least some non-problematic fibers in. And it is called the Repeat carrot salad. So this refers to raw carrot fibers, and an alternative to this would be well-cooked button mushrooms and well-cooked bamboo shoots, both of which are discussed extensively in this pro-metabolic Repeat bioenergetic world. So this would be something to try consistently for a few weeks and then assess whether or not it made a difference in your digestion, stool frequency, and even hormones. So carrots are about a 50-50 soluble to insoluble fiber ratio, while mushrooms are largely insoluble fiber. So these salads can be helpful for some people to include for regular gut cleanup and support, improving the bacterial and hormonal environment of your gut. But they don't work for everyone, so keep that in mind. Here's a quote from Dr. Pete. Quote, "The beneficial hormonal effects that have been seen during antibiotic therapy, which raise progesterone while lowering cortisol and estrogen, can be achieved safely with the carrot salad in most cases without the possible toxic effects of the antibiotics," end quote. So just saying, carrots can actually help improve the gut microbiome environment by helping clean up some of those, food gunk or bad bacteria. The raw carrot salad includes carrots, vinegar, coconut oil, and salt, and can be an easy and effective way to improve the bacteria and hormonal environment in your gut. Because these fibers can help move through gunk that is sitting there, which includes food waste and particles, but also used up hormones. So I kind of view this combination like a scrub brush, cleaning and disinfecting the insides of your intestines. The carrot fibers, which serve as the scrub, carry the coconut oil and vinegar, which are the soaps, into the intestines. Carrots grow in the ground and have developed antibacterial, antifungal fibers to fight off microbes in the soil. So raw carrots sort of act like an antibiotic that have unique toxin-binding fibers, which bind to bad bacteria and estrogen. Plus, gut bacteria have a hard time breaking down the carrot's indigestible fibers, so it's non-fermenting and will not feed the gut bacteria. The carrot kind of goes through part of your digestive tract, rather undigested, scrubbing and cleaning up along the way. The vinegar and the coconut oil, which are mild germicides, improve the antifungal, antibacterial effects of the carrot alone. Here's another quote from Dr. Repeat. Quote, "The gerontologist Frolkus recently found that mice lived 43% longer than animals on the standard American diet when they periodically had activated charcoal added to their food. Although I think carrot and bamboo shoot fibers would have a similar effect," end quote. So I include some research studies kind of illustrating the efficacy, but the raw carrot salad has been shown to improve gut balance and contain anti-endotoxin properties. The medium chain fatty acids in coconut oil have antimicrobial properties that can help protect against harmful microorganisms in the gut. Coconut oil also reduces the response to endotoxins. The vinegar in the salad aids in digestion and stimulates HCl. And the salt aids in keeping adrenaline, aldosterone, and serotonin levels down, stimulates the bowel, provides minerals, and makes the salad taste great. So you can try out the daily carrot salad for a period of time and see if it helps your digestion. We include a PDF resource called Repeat Carrot Salad with info about how to make this salad, different variations, when to eat it, etc. However, if you have tried it for a period of time and are actually consistent with it and it still doesn't work, don't worry about it. If you don't see an effect, that's okay. Again, it doesn't work for everyone. It is a tool that can help people improve their hormones, improve their bowel functions, and as a result, improve sleep and other items. So definitely just take note of those as you're experimenting. And the final note on assessing regular food choices would be to experiment with the starch to sucrose ratio, which we discussed in the best types of carb module. So starches, again, being things like potatoes, rice, sourdough bread, corn tortillas, occasional beans, and then sucrose being fruit, orange juice, maple syrup, honey, etc. Neither side are bad, but having more of one relative to the other, so the ratio of sucrose to starch, can be an important variable for you to play with. Do you have better gut health when you have more starches relative to sucrose sources, or with more sucrose sources to starches? Commonly, those in a compromised gut state can have problems with starches and will be able to tolerate more and more starches over time as they improve systemic energy production. All right, on to the next gut tip, which is eating set, bigger meals, less constant snacking. So you do not need to constantly graze all day. Try to space out your meals or snacks by 3 to 5 hours to give the MMC, that migrating motor complex, more uninterrupted time to operate. So again, the MMC runs every 1.5 to 3 hours. Now, this does not mean that you have to fast, but you also don't need to be constantly snacking throughout the day, as this is a sign that your meals weren't big enough. You weren't satiated enough from your meals. Many of the cleaning ways of the MMC, the migrating motor complex, happen at night while we're asleep. And for many people, this will be sufficient to help maintain a healthy, balanced environment in the gut digestive tract. But for others that have an impaired MMC, it's beneficial to eat discrete meals, as constant snacking is well documented to turn off the MMC. Remember, the MMC helps keep our gut sterile. It cleans, it moves things through the digestive tract. So here are kind of just some examples of, spacing out meals. So one example would be breakfast at 8, lunch at noon, dinner at 5, and a pre-bed snack at around 8:30. Another example, breakfast at 7, breakfast at lunch, snack at 3, and dinner at 7:30 or 8. And then another example that works totally fine, breakfast at 7, lunch at 11, a snack around 3, dinner at 6, and a small pre-bed snack. Find a structure that fits your schedule and lifestyle, where you can still fit in your total calories required for the day, but leave at least 3 to 5 hours between eating sessions. Next tip is do what you gotta do to poo. So something that's more important than the type of fiber you eat is that you are pooping every single day. Despite what some people say, you should be pooping every single day. Your stool is a concentrated form of toxins your body is trying to excrete, and it's about 50% microbes. So going 2, 3, or more days without pooping is increasing the toxin load in our bodies. Slowed bowel transit time leads to increased estrogen levels. Accelerated aging is detrimental to overall health and leads to skin breakouts, as your skin is one of your body's detox pathways. The more you poop, the better your skin health will be. So clearing out the gut daily will help the gut more than anything else, truly. The more you poop, the better you will feel, the better your hormone balance, and the better your body will function. Your body will be dealing with less bacterial fermentation and endotoxin production, and you'll be reabsorbing less toxins from stool that just sits there. It really is impossible to heal any gut condition without a full poop daily, as the waste in our guts is one of the biggest sources of toxin exposure in our bodies and can really hold back our metabolism. So as you're improving digestion and getting rid of metabolic breaks, you got to do what you got to do to poo. And so if the dietary changes discussed previously are not enough and you're not pooping every single day, you can experiment using a non-addictive bowel mover. These are really great tools. Energy production will improve, and over time, you will need less and less assistance to go poop every day. But we really don't want to use laxatives, as cells along the gut can become waterlogged, which can cause more issues in the long run, like damaged gut linings and inflammation. This is why I'm not a fan of relying on magnesium all the time to initiate a bowel movement, as it draws water into the intestines, working as an osmotic laxative. Once in a while, this is totally fine, and it's fine to supplement, but I don't think it's the most effective for relying on it as a regular laxative. We instead want more motility and contraction so that the appropriate amount of fluid stays in the intestine and the cells don't become waterlogged. So here's a list of some of our favorite non-addictive bowel movers. You don't need to try them all at the same time, and some may work better for you than others, but the goal is to find one that helps you poop every single day. These can help rebalance excess thyroid suppressive hormones such as estrogen, cortisol, and serotonin that are building up due to not pooping daily. And these in excess can be something that's actually holding you back from finally improving your thyroid, liver, and metabolic health. So getting some support to get bowels moving again can help lower the toxin and stress load so that your body can actually regain some ability to improve energy production again. And as you improve overall gut health and metabolic health, your digestion will regulate and bowel movers won't be needed as much over time, but it really is okay to rely on these for several months as you get your body back into a routine of pooping 1 to 3 times per day. In fact, our ancestors talked about in diaries and things like that, regularly pooping 3 times a day after each meal. So they had really good transit time. Infections, overgrowth, slow motility, low stomach acid, etc. These could really all be serving as those metabolic breaks that I refer to, holding back your metabolism. And so adding specific supplements to help get your body get rid of these so that they can actually reduce the burden on your liver, giving it actually more space and energy to convert T4 into active thyroid hormone T3, which may be the thing that will finally allow your temp and pulse to go up. So let's talk about a few of these poop support tools. The first would be ginger. So ginger is an enzymatic root that functions as an anti-inflammatory prokinetic. And so it allows food to move through the stomach faster. So you can try making ginger teas to have throughout the day. Another thing is bitters. So coffee, dandelion root tea, and other bitters. And these help stimulate bile flow and as a result have a gentle and supportive laxative effect without making waterlogged. Third would be quinones. Fourth, aged Cascara sagrada, which is actually a quinone, and then psyllium husk. So we'll dive into these now. So what the heck are quinones? So these are a group of compounds that can help re-energize the tissues of the GI tract, increasing energy production and improving systemic function. So quinones are oxidizing agents with a high affinity for electrons, making them electron acceptors that can oxidize NADH back to NAD+, thus increasing the cellular NAD+ to NADH ratio, which means better systemic energy flow and energy production. When energy is down regulated, that ratio NAD+ NADH is lower. So you have reductive stress. So quinones help cells get out of a reduced state and lower reductive stress. As a result, they're naturally anti-inflammatory. They serve as the body's intrinsic defense substances, and they aren't produced in significant quantities, and sometimes adding more can really help our resistance to stress and boost our metabolism. So here's a quote from Georgy Dinkov, quote, "Being quinones, both emodin and beta-lactofen in pau de arco are intimately involved in the proper functioning of the electron transport chain, the recycling of NADH back to NAD+, and protecting from the systemic effects of stress and aging. In addition to these metabolic systemic effects, both quinones have been shown to have a staggering array of effects, including protecting from radiation, hypoxia, inflammation, endotoxin, diabetes, cortisol, aldosterone, estrogen, prolactin, serotonin, histamine, nitric oxide, carbon monoxide, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and even the aging process in general. Given their profoundly systemic effects, it's very likely that these two quinones can contribute to improved well-being and resistance to stress, aging, and fragility," end quote. So 2 examples of quinones that we get from our food include vitamin K2, which is high in aged cheeses, healthy animal fats, and CoQ10, which is high in beef heart. But sometimes it's hard to get enough of these dietarily, and so 2 additional supports include pau de arco tea and Cascara sagrada. Cascara is an example of a quinone that is particularly helpful for gut support, but regular pau de arco tea consumption is really a great overall metabolic support to help reduce reductive stress. So let's dive into Cascara sagrada because it is my favorite gut support tool and I think it can help a lot of people. So Cascara sagrada is derived from the dried bark of the Rhamnus persiana tree, which is an indigenous to the western part of North America. It was actually traditionally used by American Indians as a traditional digestive support herbal supplement that was passed down from Native American Indians to Spanish explorers in the 1600s. But unlike other laxatives that cause waterlogging, Cascara energizes the smooth muscles of the small intestines and bowels to contract rather than irritating them. Because remember, we want that motility in the gut. So high quality cascara will help improve bowel transit time and encourage complete and regular emptying of the bowels. Cascara provides a number of other benefits beyond bowel stimulation due to the active ingredient emodin and other inflammatory anthraquinones it contains. So emodin, the active ingredient, it belongs to the family of anthraquinones, and these are a class of naturally occurring phenolic compounds. Emodin has been demonstrated to be antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and antiviral. Emodin also inhibits the formation of nitric oxide, which is a mitochondrial poison, and prevents the reabsorption of endotoxin, plus increasing mitochondrial respiration. Additional benefits of Cascara sagrada include reducing intestinal inflammation, reducing constipation and bloating, reducing intestinal swelling, re-energizing the digestive tract, and containing various antibacterial and antifungal effects. So Cascara sagrada is probably my favorite tool to help you poop daily and have good poops daily. It's not going to cause any problems, and it's not a restrictive thing in the long term. But what brand of cascara should I use? Well, the sourcing is actually very important here, as it's important that the cascara is properly aged for at least a year, yielding a very dark color. And this is to just make sure it provides the max benefits with the least amount of irritation. So my favorite brands include Satchery, and you can use Strong Sistas for a discount, Forefront Health, and Life Giving Store. I've used the products from all three of those. So how and when to take cascara? So you'll start with 1/8 of a teaspoon dissolved in some warm water. And as a warning, it doesn't taste good. It tastes very bitter. So just get it down and follow up with a little bit more plain water. So the best time to take cascara is after food, ideally in the evening before bed, preferably without many other supplements and medications. And if no improvement to bowel movements occur the next day at this dose of 1/8 teaspoon, then the next day increase to 1/4 teaspoon at one time in the evening. Or you can split it into 2 doses. So some people find increased benefits by splitting the dose and having a little in the morning and in the evening. So you could try 1/8 teaspoon before you go to bed and then 1/8 teaspoon when you wake up. Again, if you don't see an improvement to bowels, you're not pooping every day, increase another 1/8 teaspoon. So you'd be at 1/4 plus 1/8 teaspoon. Then if you still don't see improvements, increase to 1/2 teaspoon. And again, you can either do this at one time or split it into 2 doses in the evening and the morning. And if your bowel movements become too loose, you can overdo it. Then you'll just discontinue for a day and then reduce your dose when you do add it back in 2 days later. There are really only liver concerns at doses at 1 tablespoon or above, and I promise you, you do not need 1 tablespoon. And there are no dependency or withdrawals issues. So it's simply helping to re-energize motility along your digestive tract through improved energy production, since Cascara sagrada is a great source of emodin, which is a type of a quinone. Now, for someone who is struggling with the opposite side of the constipation spectrum, that would be loose stools and diarrhea, if the raw carrot salad didn't really help you out that much, that's a sign that maybe insoluble fiber wasn't doing much for you, and you may benefit from a little boost in soluble fiber. Now, remember, diarrhea is not a form of hyperactive metabolism. Your digestive tract isn't moving foods quickly through you. Instead, it's still a sign of a sluggish digestive system, just a different manifestation and expression of the problem. So psyllium husk is definitely controversial in the pro-metabolic space, but some additional soluble fiber can be helpful for some people with continuous loose stools, and it works by increasing stool bulk. It will also help to bind to bile, endotoxin, and excess estrogen along the digestive tract. So psyllium husk will work with any fiber in the gut to form a sort of gel, which helps ferment the fiber and ultimately result in a higher butyrate production, which, as we covered in part 1, is the preferred fuel source for the gut lining cells. So psyllium husk is about 70% soluble fiber and 30% soluble fiber. And just start with 1 teaspoon to gauge your tolerance, and slowly work your way up to 1 to 2 tablespoons per day, but make sure that you consume with plenty of water since it gels so quickly. But there are some important notes. First is that you must be pooping every day to ensure that this fiber is actually getting out of you and pulling waste and toxins along with it. You do not want the psyllium husk to just sit there in your gut. So you may need the combination of the psyllium husk and the cascara to move it through you. The cascara will help with the movement. Psyllium husk will not work for everyone. If it increases your constipation, don't use it. And for many, once they use it for a period of time, they really don't need to use it again or as frequently, as it's really helped to eliminate excess bacterial buildup and gunk and helped really get your digestion back to normal. Remember, long periods of constipation can really lead to like rotten junk that just kind of sits along the digestive tract. So we don't really need to use psyllium husk for forever. Use it as a tool to help you kind of get back to a normal state. You also want to really monitor cholesterol numbers, as we really don't want cholesterol to go super low. So if you consume enough fiber in your diet, I would suggest trying, carrot salad, cascara sagrada first. And then if those really don't do enough, you still have a bunch of loose stools, you can try psyllium husk as well. Psyllium husk is not a must for gut health. It is not my go-to suggestion. It's just another tool in your toolbox, especially with diarrhea and loose stools. So let's move on to some more bonus tips to improve gut health. Next up is lower stress. So we really want to lower stress in our day-to-day life whenever you can for multiple reasons. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do hard things and pursue your dreams, not saying that at all, but finding those little moments throughout the day to just take a breath and take for yourself. Honestly, I think many health problems stem from dysregulated nervous systems. When we're stuck in the fight or flight response 24/7, the internal state of our body completely changes, meaning how our body functions will change. For example, in a stressed out state, blood flow is redirected from our gut to more vital organs to keep you alive and ensure survival. So until we change that internal state, we really can't expect our body and our gut to fully heal. We can't really expect functions to be turned back on. Set aside time every day for a little me time to enter that parasympathetic rest and digest state. This doesn't have to be hours and hours. Truly, just setting aside 5 minutes will make a huge difference. It's okay to be busy, but setting aside some time each day can really help. The next tip is to assess eating habits. How we eat matters just as much as what we eat. With a compromised digestive system, we want to provide as much pre-digestion as possible. So the first point will be to avoid distraction so that you're not just, swallowing big chunks of your food, eating really quickly. The second thing, thoroughly chew your food. Try to get it into an applesauce consistency, and this will help pre-break down the food and reduce the burden on your digestive system. Try to swish the liquids around in the mouth a little to gather saliva to mix food with the salivary enzymes. And the third point, honestly, smell food. Be present and try to avoid distractions. This will really help keep your body in that parasympathetic state while you're eating so that your digestive system can be more turned on and actually work as it's supposed to, and less sympathetic state activation where digestion will be compromised. One of the things that really helps me is to take a few minutes before you eat your meal to do some nose breathings and try to calm yourself down. Eating a meal in a stress state will definitely lead to compromised digestion. Next tip, one of my favorite tips, reduce PUFA consumption. So I love the topic of PUFAs because the types of fat we consume makes up the types of fat inside of us, and they also serve as signaling molecules. So they can really change how the inside of our body functions. So swapping our cooking fats and our main sources of dietary fats from high PUFAs to more saturated fat is one of the best things we can do to support the healing of our digestive systems. While there may be short-term improvements, the toxic breakdown products from lipid peroxidation of both omega-6s and omega-3s can lead to systemic damage. You do not need to overdo PUFA consumption, omega-6 or omega-3. Prioritize saturated fat-rich sources, and I promise you, you're getting enough of omega-6 and omega-3 by eating animal fats. So for the fats that we do consume dietarily, try to prioritize the left column with the green dot above. And so these are fats rich in saturated fats with a better saturated to unsaturated fat ratio. Because again, we're never going to completely avoid PUFAs. It's more about that ratio of saturated to saturated fat. So this includes eggs, butter, ghee, tallow, coconut oil, suet, cocoa butter and chocolate, and dairy fats. We definitely want to minimize the middle column, and you really don't need to eat these that often, and that'll be olive oil, macadamia nuts, conventional lard, corn and soy free, traditional lard, which is higher in saturated fat, is totally fine, but Conventional lard can have as much PUFA as canola oil because of what hogs are fed. And then definitely soaked and sprouted nuts can be consumed on occasion if you do well with those, but those are also high PUFA sources. So again, we want to prioritize the saturated fats, minimize consumption of the MUFA and the PUFA whenever we can. And then on the right side, try to just avoid these as much as you can. So vegetable oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, soy, corn oil, flax seeds, fish oil, and a bunch of raw nuts and seeds. And whatever you do, please do not consume margarine. Butter is so much better than margarine. Butter not only has a great fatty acid composition, but butter is also a source of butyrate. Remember in the last module, we covered how butyrate is the preferred fuel source for the cells that line our gut. Butyrate in the gut also serves as a signaling molecule to encourage proper metabolism of the gut lining cells so that we can maintain that low oxygen environment in the colon and promote the growth of the right kind of gut bacteria. One other note on the eggs, in the most ideal world, these eggs are fed corn and soy-free diets, which will improve the fatty acid composition and reduce the amount of PUFAs in the egg. Our farm co-op, Angel Acres, is one example where we had our eggs tested and the fatty acid profile was improved due to the types of fat in the chicken's diet. All right, the next tip. Consume bone broth, gelatin, and or collagen daily. So you may be able to tolerate one of these sources better than the other, but the anti-inflammatory amino acids present in collagen sources, these improve gut integrity and reduce endotoxin damage. The amino acids glycine and glutamine, these have been shown to help repair the cell wall in the guts of critically ill patients with leaky guts. And so really try to make it a priority to get these anti-inflammatory metabolism boosting amino acids in daily. So I would try to shoot for a minimum 10 grams a day. So that's 1 to 1.5 cups of broth, 1 scoop of collagen, or 1 scoop of gelatin made into gummies. So make that the bare minimum. You can definitely do more. I like to do more. Next tip is to raise vitamin D levels. So getting daily sun in is vital. And you could use this free app on the phone called D Minder to let you know how much sun you get that day, given the amount of sun given the amount of skin you're exposing, the time of year, your geographical location, basing it all on the UV index. Now, for some parts of the year, you may not have good sun exposure, so vitamin D3 supplementation can definitely be valuable. And for those that don't tolerate vitamin D3 supplementation orally, using it topically can be helpful as it bypasses digestion. But keep in mind that topical application only has a 10% absorption rate, so definitely calculate that in for dosages. 5,000 IU is typically pretty fine there. So using frequent blood work to check your vitamin D3 levels, and ideally 25 OHD. Ideally, we're sitting at the higher end of the range, 50 to 90 nanograms per milliliter. When it comes to vitamin D, this is, giving your body the tools it needs to raise metabolism and move metabolites through the electron transport chain. And one of those needed tools is adequate vitamin D. So low vitamin D levels could be one of those missing links that your body is missing out on to actually produce energy properly. But as you know, getting sunlight is more than just vitamin D levels. Circadian health and light exposure impacts every aspect of our well-being, including our ability to move food through our GI tract. So full spectrum light is what our bodies have evolved to require in order to thrive. And morning sunlight, midday sun, evening light around sunsets, these are all important to get our circadian rhythm in check, which improves our digestion. And so sunlight on the belly, especially UVB light, has actually been shown to exert anti-inflammatory and intestinal microbiome modulating effects. So if you can, expose your belly to the sun midday during the warmer months. It'll definitely improve the gut. Next up will be vagus nerve support. So there are a number of ways to help stimulate the vagus nerve to improve digestion. Truly anything that supports the rest and digest parasympathetic state, like lowering stress in your life, this will help improve vagal tone. However, here are a few other ways you can help stimulate and improve vagal tone. First, anything that activates the parasympathetic state, like slow breathing, mindfulness. Second, laughing. Third, being active during the day. Fourth, singing, humming, or chanting. Fifth, gargling. Sixth, frequent social connections. Seventh will be occasional coffee enemas, since the act of holding in the coffee liquid used during the enemas can stimulate the vagus nerve, and that caffeine will stimulate receptors in your intestines that can also help stimulate the vagal system. Another thing would be laying on your right side while you're sleeping has been shown to activate the vagus nerve more. And the last for now is there are also vagus nerve stimulators that you can actually clip on your ear. And so this works by electrically stimulating the vagus nerve. So this could be something that you utilize as you're getting work done or something on the computer. Next tip, kind of obvious, but you really can't have a healthy gut if you're eating a bunch of processed foods. So we want to minimize consumption of food additives that are common in foods that come in a package. So really be aware of the ingredients in the food products, the drinks that you consume regularly. And we want to try to reduce consumption of foods that come in package as a general just rule of thumb. So cooking most of your meals at home will really allow you to better understand what molecules and ingredients you are putting in your body. The next tip is to buy organic grains. So if you're going to buy grains, meaning flour for sourdough or baking, oats, masa harina flour, which is made from corn tortillas, etc., make sure you buy organic. This is probably pretty important relative to buying organic for fruit, for example. It's probably more important because non-organic breads and oats contain some of the highest levels of pesticides, and this is due to the widespread practice of using pesticides as a pre-harvest to dry out the grains earlier. So farmers can literally use pesticides and spray that across the field to help their crops die and dry out so they can harvest earlier. Here's a quote from the literature, quote, "Wheat products have been shown in independent testing to contain higher residues post-processing and make up a significant portion of the average North American's dietary glyphosate exposure," end quote. And remember, non-GMO means exactly that, not genetically modified. But that does not mean organic. And it does not mean that the crops were not sprayed with pesticides. So really try to prioritize organic grains. Next tip is we definitely want to try to avoid iron supplementation and minimize iron fortified food. You do not want to fear iron in meat. We want to get iron from the food that we consume. You don't really want to add iron supplementation and processed food that contains iron. Unfortunately, added iron is very common in flours, packaged baked goods, and many bread products, since a lot of the flours are fortified with iron. So really read ingredient labels and try to source bread or flour that is not iron fortified. If you see reduced iron on a label, that means iron fortified. And unfortunately, that's very common in America. So again, grains, starch sourcing is really important. And the final tip will be to limit alcohol consumption. So alcohol has been shown to increase gut permeability, which can increase the endotoxin load on the body. And I truly believe that this is due to the poor quality of alcohol these days, as the crops produced for alcohol are doused in chemicals and pesticides. Our ancestors really used to drink on occasion. It was pretty common, but alcohol was made very differently back then relative to conventional agriculture. Of course, live your life and you can enjoy drinks on occasion, but frequent alcohol consumption, especially with poor quality alcohol choices, is really not going to help you support a strong gut lining. Try to not make this a daily thing. A frequently asked question we get is, fermented foods, and they can be consumed in moderation, like how our ancestors did, very small parts of their plate, side pieces. So a small amount of probiotic or fermented food will not harm a healthy person and can certainly provide gut benefits. For example, kefir has a unique bacterial profile that promotes motility with anti-inflammatory and anti-tumor properties, while also being a rich source of minerals like calcium, magnesium, and potassium that support GI contraction along the digestive tract. But large amounts of fermented foods, so guzzling kombucha, slamming kimchi, only drinking kefir, these are not necessary for health. Like most things in life, moderation. Overdosing can cause some problems, and for some people, they really can't tolerate fermented foods well at all. And here's why. For someone with slow digestion, heavy consumption of fermented products can actually increase the risk of populating the small intestine with bacteria, which is not what we want. We want the small intestine to be relatively sterile. So with more bacteria in the small intestine, the sugar in the food we consume can be used by the bacteria, which can produce lactic acid. And as we discussed in the energy production section, our body produces lactic acid, for example, when we use our muscles faster than our lungs can supply them with adequate oxygen. And this is the L-lactic acid form. The lactic acid production during fermentation for microorganisms is the D-lactic acid form, which can be inflammatory, and an increased number in our bloodstream can lead to negative neurologic symptoms. And then we also have to think about what happens to these energy substrates when we consume them. Well, both of these lactic acid forms are converted to glucose for our cells to use as energy using what's called the Cori cycle. But the problem is that high amounts of liver glycogen are required for this conversion from lactic acid to glucose to take place, putting yet another burden on our livers. And this is also an inefficient energy production. It requires 6 ATP molecules to produce just 2 ATP molecules. So it takes more energy to break them down than what you get out of them. So this very rapidly can use up stored glycogen in the liver, and this can lower blood sugar levels if this is a huge part of our diet. Here's a quote from Dr. Ray Peat, quote, "Preventatively, avoiding foods containing lactic acid, such as sauerkraut, would be helpful since bacterial lactic acid is much more toxic than the type we form under stress," end quote. Fermented foods are not bad, and our ancestors certainly consumed them as condiments or in small quantities. But you don't have to overconsume them, and they shouldn't be your main energy source. But if you want to test how you do with them to improve digestion, gauge your individual tolerance in small doses. Again, enjoying them from time to time is not a problem, especially if you have a good metabolism. You just don't have to go out of your way to add them in high quantities. Remember, they were a small part of our ancestors' plate, and large amounts will not automatically lead to health. It's also important to remember that a lot of the commercial products, sometimes manufacturers use just random strains of bacteria, so you really want to be careful about where you're sourcing these things. So some people like to make them themselves, like, sauerkraut or things like that at home. But if you're going to buy at the store, fermented foods with the least amount of lactic acid would be cottage cheese. Love cottage cheese, especially. Don't fear cottage cheese if you can digest it totally fine. Skyr yogurt. I love skyr yogurt. Again, very low in lactic acid. Greek yogurt, again, low in lactic acid since a lot of that has been drained out. Cheese contains low amounts of lactic acid, but it's still technically a fermented food. And homemade kimchi or sauerkraut or homemade kefir. Again, just be really careful about sourcing when you're buying any of these fermented products. So as always, run your own experiment. Does regular inclusion of fermented products make you feel better? Does it increase your body temperature? Does it keep your bowel movements regular? Run your own experiments. All right, let's wrap up. So most people do not need extremes to fix their gut health. Thankfully, the body wants to heal, and it can heal when it's given the right tools. For most people, working on improving metabolism, thyroid function, body temperature, and implementing some of the tips we provide, this will be enough, acting like a course correct and improving systemic function of the body. Again, you are not doomed. The human body was not improperly designed. Your issues can be fixed. For some people who have been dealing with some of these gut issues chronically, they may need a little bit more intervention, which we'll cover in the next module. We'll also cover some more specific gut conditions in depth, like Candida and SIBO.